If you're deficient in a fat-soluble vitamin like A, E, D, or K, the variety of significant health issues that can come about is a really big deal. So it can be pretty important to understand, do you have the ability to absorb these fat-soluble vitamins? So in this video, I'm going to share what to look out for and how to correct some of these problems that can restrict your ability to absorb these fat-soluble vitamins. Let's jump in.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So if you're deficient in some of these fat-soluble vitamins, you can be dealing with issues like, dry and flaky skin or immune system dysfunction, or vision problems, or fatigue, or muscle weakness, or easy bruising, and the list could go on and on for a long time. So we really need to help our body be able to absorb these fat-soluble vitamins so the body can function the way that it wants to function. And one thing that everybody agrees on, both in the medical world and the natural world, is that if someone has had their gallbladder removed, it can really restrict their ability to assimilate these fat-soluble vitamins, and they're at a much higher risk of becoming deficient in one of these fat-soluble vitamins. So I'm going to help you understand why this loss of gallbladder is a problem, and when we understand that, it can also help us understand why some other folks can have problems even though they still have their gallbladder. So when we look at these fat-soluble vitamins, they have to come into the system in a way that the body can actually use them. So what happens is when we eat food, our stomachs make hydrochloric acid or HCl, and that starts to acidify and break that food down. But when that acidic product leaves the stomach and goes into the duodenum, which is the first 10 inches of the small intestine, then the gallbladder squirts this alkaline bile substance down onto the acid product. It creates this sizzle that really helps us bust the food apart and pull all the nutrients out of that food. Now, the big problem is that this bile that the gallbladder squirts down is a soapy substance that helps us emulsify or break down our dietary fats. So these dietary fats need to be broken down and accessible to the body to be able to assimilate the fat-soluble vitamins. These vitamins have to be soluble with fat. So it's not just a matter of eating fats and then you can assimilate these fat-soluble vitamins. You actually need to be able to digest or break down these fats to a level that the body can actually use them. Then the fat-soluble vitamins can be assimilated. So when someone's lost their gallbladder, they don't have that bolus of bile storing in the gallbladder waiting to squirt down on the acid product that leaves the stomach. So they may have a small amount of bile trickling down into the intestinal tract kind of all the time. And that may help them at least digest these dietary fats a little bit so they can break those fats down and at least assimilate some of these fat-soluble vitamins. But they don't have the large amount that's really required to really break the food down correctly. So that's why we see this trouble with people who've lost their gallbladder and an inability to really assimilate fat-soluble vitamins correctly. Now I'm going to put a link in the description below this video for those who've lost their gallbladder for 6 steps you should take if you've lost your gallbladder. And these steps will help you process those dietary fats better so that you can assimilate more fat-soluble vitamins. But let's move on now to help everybody else understand what other things can cause problems by absorbing these fat-soluble vitamins. One of the biggest problems can be if somebody's consuming a low-fat diet. Back in the 80s, we wore parachute pants, and everybody thought that consuming dietary fats was going to make you fat. And we know now that that's 100% fiction. We all know that that's not true. But the problem is that this new science and this new information can sometimes take 20 to 30 years to make it to the mainstream. The government information that kind of goes out is really slow, and it could take a long time for the mainstream to really learn the newest science and the newest things we understand about nutrition. So a lot of people are still wearing parachute pants, or they're still eating a low-fat diet, and when you're not bringing in enough dietary fat, then you're not going to be able to assimilate these fat-soluble vitamins. So a person really needs to bring these dietary fats in, and they need to be good dietary fats. A lot of people are using these fat replacement products, not only to have low-fat products, but then they're like, oh, we're going to use like margarine or like seed oils instead of good, real food fat sources like butter and animal fats and things that the body can actually recognize as food. A lot of these processed junk foods the body can't recognize because they're synthetic or a little bit too processed. So we really want to eat real food dietary fats to bring those fats in so that the body can properly use those dietary fats to assimilate these fat-soluble vitamins. And if you're still concerned about eating, I don't want to gain weight, I don't want to be fat, my book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, will help you understand why this world is fiction and why we really need good dietary fats to come in. And the book's available on Amazon, but I'm going to put a link in the description below where you can get the whole thing totally for free so you can move past this 80s that you're kind of still living in if you're still running in horror from dietary fats. Now, this next problem is probably the most common issue that's going to restrict a person's ability to assimilate these fat-soluble vitamins. So this bile is stored in the gallbladder and it's concentrated there so that it can be very effective when using just a small amount. So that concentration that takes place in the gallbladder is very important. The problem is there's a lot of things in our environment and in our food now that can thicken up that bile so it doesn't flow correctly and it's not moving through the intestinal tract, it's not coming down and helping us assimilate the foods that we're consuming, so we really can't break down the dietary fats that we're eating. And this problem is really common. So if your bile is not flowing correctly, you may be consuming the right dietary fats, but if you can't break them down correctly, they're not going to be available for the body to use to really assimilate all the fat-soluble vitamins. And some people will think, oh, well, I'll just supplement with these vitamins and give them to my body. But you hear a lot about, hey, when you're supplementing with vitamin A, E, D, or K, you really need to take that supplement when consuming fats. And that's why they can't go into the system correctly if they're not going in with fats. So if you can't emulsify or break down those fats that are coming into the system, it's almost like you're not really bringing in the fats. So that way, when you're not bringing in the fats, you're not bringing in the vitamins either. So we really need bile to be flowing correctly to be able to emulsify those fats. Now, it is also possible for someone not to be producing enough bile, but that issue is a lot more rare. It's a lot more common for someone's bile just to become too thick and sticky to flow correctly. So some people may supplement with ox bile or TUDCA to kind of supply the body with that bile, and that can improve the ability to emulsify our dietary fats, but it can also create a lot of problems for some folks. So we'll put a link in the description below this video for when is ox bile a bad idea. And if you're going to go that route, it's really important to understand the problems and the right timing to use those type of supplements. But again, instead of supplementing with ox bile or TUDCA, we like to see people help the body function the way that it's supposed to function. So if you can just get bile moving like it should, then you don't need to supplement with that ox bile or TUDCA type situations. So below the video in the description, we're going to put a link to our video for 5 steps to improve bile flow, and you can take these steps and get your bile moving. But right now, if you're not even sure if your bile is moving, jump over and watch our video of 10 signs of poor bile flow so you can get an idea, okay, do I even need to worry about this? Do I need to take steps to make sure my bile is flowing so that I can assimilate all these fat-soluble vitamins? I can't wait to hear about your results.